The following is independent geopolitical analysis and personal opinion only. I am not a journalist, not a government official, and not a military authority. All claims are based on publicly available reporting. For years, the Pentagon has been trying desperately to retire the A-10 Warthog. Congress said no, the Air Force said it was too old, too slow, too vulnerable to survive a modern war, and then Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, and somehow the plane the military tried to kill twice is now the one hunting Iran's navy. Let me give you the quick background, because this story has layers that most coverage is completely skipping over. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated air campaign against Iran, what the military is calling Operation Epic Fury. The campaign opened with long-range strikes by B-2 stealth bombers and cruise missiles. Within days, Iran responded by declaring the Strait of Hormuz closed to international shipping. Now, if you don't know the Strait of Hormuz, it's roughly 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and through those 21 miles passes about 20% of the world's entire oil supply, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Close that strait and you don't just hurt America, you hurt China, India, South Korea, Japan, basically the entire global economy. Iran's strategy has been simple and effective. Deploy swarms of fast attack watercraft, small, fast, armed boats operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to harass, threaten, and block shipping lanes. These aren't aircraft carriers, they're not submarines, they're small, agile, and very hard to hit from altitude. So the U.S. military had a problem, and the solution, in my analysis, is genuinely surprising. On March 19th, General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stood at a Pentagon podium and said something that should have been a much bigger story than it became. He said, and I'm quoting directly from the public briefing, "The A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is hunting and killing fast attack watercraft in the Strait of Hormuz." Let that sink in, the A-10. The plane that fires a 30mm Gatling cannon originally designed to destroy Soviet tanks. The plane the Air Force has been trying to retire for over a decade. The plane that Congress had to legally mandate be kept alive with a minimum of 103 aircraft just to stop the Air Force from scrapping it. That plane is now on the front line of one of the most strategically critical waterways on Earth. And it gets more dramatic. Based on publicly available reporting from Air Force Times and the War Zone, the Warthogs have been operating in coordination with A-64 Apache attack helicopters, another platform the military has repeatedly tried to phase out. They are flying maritime interdiction missions, hunting fast boats, targeting them with precision-guided munitions, Maverick missiles, and that infamous 30mm cannon. Then, on April 3rd, things got significantly darker. A US F-15E Strike Eagle was shot down over Iran, and almost simultaneously, near the Strait of Hormuz, an A-10 Warthog went down. The pilot was rescued, according to officials cited by the New York Times, but the cause of the A-10 crash is still disputed. Iranian state media claimed their air defenses hit it. A source cited by Fox News called that claim not accurate, saying it went down to enemy fire during a rescue operation for the F-15 crew. The Pentagon has not fully clarified. So in my analysis, point one is this. The A-10 is not just symbolically in this war. It has been a primary tactical tool, and it has now taken a loss. Here is what I think most analysts and commentators are missing. This story is not really about one aircraft. It is about three things that intersect in a fascinating and troubling way. First, the retirement debate just changed forever. The Air Force has wanted to retire the A-10 for years. The argument was always that the Warthog is too slow, too low-flying, too vulnerable to survive against a near-peer adversary with modern air defenses. Congress kept blocking retirement anyway. Now here is the irony: the planes. Critics said it was unsuitable for modern warfare, and yet when a real conflict arrived, the military reached for it immediately. According to Flight Global and The Aviationist, the strategy was exactly what the A-10's advocates always predicted. First, use stealth aircraft like the B-2 to suppress air defenses and achieve localized air superiority. Then send in the A-10 to do the close-in, slow, lethal work that no other aircraft can do as cheaply or as effectively. The critics weren't entirely wrong. The A-10 did take a loss, but its supporters weren't wrong either. It is in the fight, and it is making a difference. Second, the Strait of Hormuz problem is far harder than any briefing suggests. Most people imagine this conflict as jets bombing buildings. But the strait is being contested in a fundamentally different way: small boats, mines, drones, shore-based missiles. These are not targets for B-2 stealth bombers. They require aircraft that can loiter, stay in the area for hours, waiting for targets of opportunity. CENTCOM itself said it publicly. The A-10 can loiter for hours, standing by and ready to execute a mission whenever needed. That is not a compliment you give a stealth bomber. The Warthog's value here is specifically about time on station, which is a capability. The newer generation of jets simply does not match in this role. Third, and this is the part I want you to sit with, losing any aircraft in this theater is strategically significant. The crash of an A-10 and the confirmed shoot-down of an F-15E on the same day tells us something important. Iran still has the capacity to threaten U.S. aircraft. The war is not going as cleanly as the April First White House address suggested. 2 days after the president said the U.S. had beaten and completely decimated Iran, the U.S. lost 2 aircraft in a single day. I am not saying that to be political. I am saying it because the gap between the public narrative and the operational reality is the most important analytical signal we have right now. Here is where I will be direct about what I think is coming, and I want to stress again. This is analysis, not reporting. I could be wrong. In my view, the A-10's role in this conflict is actually a sign that the U.S. is in a phase of the war that nobody planned for, the grinding, attritional phase. The opening shock and awe. Strikes are done. The strait is still contested. Iran still has the ability to threaten aircraft, and the U.S. military is having to reach for every tool available, including a 50-year-old aircraft it was legally prevented from retiring. I think there are 3 possible trajectories from here. Trajectory 1. The U.S. successfully degrades the URG's fast boat capability to the point where commercial shipping can resume under some form of escort. CENTCOM has already publicly claimed destroying more than 100 Iranian naval vessels. If that pace continues, the strait reopens gradually. Trajectory 2. Iran absorbs the losses and sustains pressure, potentially with support that Moscow has reportedly provided in the form of targeting data. Based on reporting from Reuters and the Times of Israel, and the conflict grinds on into a prolonged standoff that bleeds U.S. resources and global energy markets simultaneously. Trajectory 3, and the most dangerous in my analysis, a ground operation. Multiple defense outlets, including the war zone, have noted that the deployment of additional Warthogs came alongside increasing signs that a ground operation on Iranian soil could come soon. The A-10 is the perfect close air support aircraft for exactly that mission. And if Trajectory 3 materializes, the NATO crisis, with Europe already refusing basing rights and airspace, becomes exponentially more consequential, because a ground war in Iran would require regional basing, logistics, and political cover that the U.S. currently does not have from its allies. If this analysis is correct, here are 3 specific things to watch in the next 30–60 days. Watch the A-10 retirement legislation. Congress is required to receive a briefing from the Air Force this month on the A-10's future. Watch whether lawmakers use the Hormuz deployment as leverage to extend the fleet's life beyond September 2026, which is the current deadline. If they do, it signals that Congress believes this conflict is going longer than the White House is publicly admitting. Watch the fate of the downed F-15E crew. As of this recording, the search for 1 crew member is still ongoing. If Iran captures and displays an American pilot, the political and military pressure on the White House to escalate will be enormous. How Trump responds publicly in that scenario will tell us a great deal about how much pressure he is actually under. Watch NATO Secretary General Rudd's visit to Washington next week. If Trump's tone softens even slightly after that meeting, it could signal a backroom deal on NATO burden sharing in exchange for reduced public rhetoric. If Trump continues calling NATO a paper tiger after Rudd leaves, the alliance crisis is real, and the Hormuz operation will have to continue without European support indefinitely. One last thing before you go, and this is important. Everything I have said here is independent analysis. I am one person reading publicly available reports. I could be wrong on any of this, especially on Trajectory 3. If a ground operation happens, I will be the first to admit I underestimated the timeline. If the strait reopens quietly in 2 weeks, same thing. What I do know is this. The plane they tried to retire twice is fighting a war in a strait that controls 20% of the world's oil. And that is a story worth paying attention to. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think the A-10 gets formally saved by Congress after this? Do you think a ground operation is coming? I read every comment. Subscribe if you want this kind of independent analysis every single day. I will see you tomorrow. The following is a reminder that this video represents independent opinion and analysis only. It does not constitute news reporting. All factual claims are drawn from publicly available sources listed in the description below.